Welcome back to Nothing Happens for a Reason. Today's episode is a bit different. In fact, it's an entirely abnormal episode for many reasons. The first being that we got so caught up in chatting before we hit record that I completely skipped the formalities. I didn't even introduce him. So let me do that right now. My guest today is Zach, the host of the incredible podcast, When We Die Talks. His show is built entirely around a single massive question. What do you think happens when we die? But here's what makes Zach's perspective so unique and why I wanted to have this conversation. As he discusses, Zach hasn't actually experienced any profound loss of his own yet. His projects, his podcast, and his obsession with the topic didn't start because he was trying to survive a broken heart like so many of us. It started because of a deep, raw death anxiety. And honestly, I am so incredibly grateful for people like Zach. In a world that is deeply death illiterate, it is rare to find people who are death adjacent, who willingly step into this room. He isn't having these tough conversations out of survival to process his own grief. He's doing it out of a genuine desire to understand more and ultimately to just be a better human. Because he hasn't experienced significant loss, it forced me to look at my own seat at the table. Sitting across from Zach, I found myself tangled up in the very question his show asks. When we panic about death, what are we actually terrified of? Is it the grand mystery of the void? Or is it just the terrifying weight of the grief itself? The feelings, the longings, the sheer scale of missing the people and the pets who make up our world. While editing this, I had a realization that hit a little too close to home. I don't hold religious beliefs. I don't believe in heaven, but I've had experiences that I've talked about before, some psychedelic, some otherwise, where I desperately want to know there is something more. I look for signs. I want to believe in the energy of my mom and my sister. But if I'm being completely honest with you, that search isn't entirely about them. It's a little bit selfish. It's about me. I want there to be a next so I can still feel connected. I want them to exist somewhere so they can visit me, so I can feel their energy. Because the alternative, the absolute finality of them just being gone, is a reality I'm still figuring out how to carry. Our beliefs about the afterlife are often less about the dead and more about how the living survive the quiet. At least that's my perspective. Even with those big, heavy thoughts floating around, the conversation itself was remarkably light, organic, and full of laughs. So, here is my conversation with Zach. This is Nothing Happens for a Reason.
Really, we just start with, what do you think happens when we die? And then we see where the conversation goes. If I could hide my face, that'd be better. But I don't know if that's an option.
Is this part of the anonymous part of...
Yeah, totally. It's like if I could be fully anonymous and everybody else, that'd be the ideal situation.
Two-way anonymous?
Or just one way, and I get to be the anonymous one. I don't know how that'd work, but, I think that's the ideal situation for me.
I think it might defeat the purpose.
It probably would.
I think you'd have to rename your podcast.
Probably, but, I can dream, can't I?
Of course, yeah.
You're hiding in the shadows.
Speaking of your podcast, what's the name of your podcast?
When We Die Talks.
Do you want to tell me where the origin of this podcast came from?
Oh, gosh. The full version or the short version? Or the medium version?
The most authentic version.
Because the whole thing started with the voicemail. And so that was really kind of born out of turning 35, having a midlife crisis, and being very concerned about my dog dying, who I'm 38 now, so it's been 3 years. He is still alive. He is, I think I can start now saying that he's getting close to 19.
Okay.
So he's an
Wow.
old dog, but I just kind of always had this kind of fear and anxiety around death. And yeah, when I hit 35, it just felt like, oh man, I am getting close to halfway there. And I haven't really figured out any of my feelings around this. I keep on avoiding it. And so I need to do something to kind of to tap into that instead of running from it because that is not working. It's not really solving any problems for me. And so yeah, I kind of quickly came up with the idea of the voicemail to just kind of like hear people's thoughts on what they thought happened when we die and then quickly realized from that that I was getting an input, but I wasn't like really getting to kind of work through my feelings or at least just have a conversation about it. Not necessarily that I share, much of my many of my feelings or anything in the episodes or anything. And a good friend who I don't know if you know of her company or project, Hello Mortal.
Mm.
Mora, she does really, really cool stuff, but I had met with her. She was on my podcast very early on. She told me I should make it into a podcast and then had her on. But yeah, and it was that just led me to being able to have some conversations with friends and friends of friends, and then people that I found on Instagram that I thought would be interesting. And then from that led to kind of this anonymous format that I do now where I just talk to strangers and kind of hear what they think happens. And and ultimately a lot of the conversation isn't about that. It'll go into grief and I mean, I guess some of them go into grief, some of them stay big picture and it's very a philosophical conversation. But yeah, so I think that's maybe the medium version of the podcast and how it kind of came to be.
Has the like death anxiety been something that you remember carrying with you for longer than just about your dog when you turned
Oh
35?
yeah. Yeah, from childhood. I remember
Childhood.
always being afraid of death, and I mean, I sometimes feel guilty with the people that I talk to. It's like, you have a real reason to have a fear of death. I
Hmm.
don't, like, I've lost people that I'm supposed to lose, I've lost grandparents, but I haven't lost anyone in my life, thankfully, that, was untimely or anything like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I remember being very little and just being absolutely terrified that I was gonna die. It's like when people talk about like, "Oh yeah, when you're a kid and you feel invincible," and I was like, "No,
Hmm.
no." Like I always was concerned, like, "Oh, if I do this, I could die." Like that was just always a thought process, and I don't necessarily know where that comes from or anything. But yeah, so it's been with me for my entire life, or at least as long as I can remember.
And you just said you have no idea where those fears came from.
No, I mean, I don't know
Mm.
if I don't know, I feel like I'm in, like, a little bit of a place where I'm just kind of blaming everything. And I blame a lot of things on growing up in suburbia. I think that is just kind of like the perfect microcosm of American ideals in a very superficial way, and I don't know, I think there's a lot of fear in suburbia about everything. And so I don't know, and it's not like it's new, and I think it's probably gotten worse. I don't really watch the news, but it just felt like every news story was about someone dying or someone getting killed or someone getting murdered. But yeah, I can't like correlate it to be like, oh yeah, I remember this one thing happened. And then that just stuck with me. It's just, yeah, I just kind of always remember like, I don't know, it's having maybe some self awareness of that this wasn't permanent. I always kind of was like weighing the consequences of decisions. And it's like, should I really do this? Like, not that I, you know, was ever considering jumping off of a building, but like, should I jump off this building? Like, I wouldn't have just like, oh yeah, I'm a kid, like I'm having fun. It was like, hold on, wait, what's the pros and cons here? Like, I think I've
Mhm.
just always been maybe too much in my head.
Hmm. What is like your family of origin think about all of this? Like, do they have similar fears or do they have theories?
Well, my dad is, and I've had him on the podcast. He is very pragmatic. I don't want to say like full on nihilist, but it's definitely kind of like, yeah, we die and that's what happens. And like, not fully nothing matters, but just kind of like, yep, I know I'm going to die. And like, that's a fact of life. And I don't remember when I wasn't here, and I won't remember when I'm not here. And so he has this kind of very like clear cut, very, yeah, just very knowing and accepting of that. I think my mom is definitely more, we haven't necessarily, I mean, everybody in my family is supportive. You know, my mom, my dad, my sister, they're very supportive. My sister, so I guess I should come back to my mom in a second, but my sister is very kind of like witchy and like, I mean, her dream has always been to live next to a graveyard. I mean, just like spooky stuff, like Halloween's
Mm.
her favorite holiday. So she's very into it. My mom, I don't think we've necessarily like, she's very supportive. I don't necessarily know if we've really fully talked about, you know, what she believes. I would say twice a week I'll get an article about near death experiences. And so I think she's very interested in near death
Eh.
experiences and just kind of like I think right now, what did she tell me a couple days ago that our grandma, my grandma, her mom is haunting the fan in her house and that it's just turning off and on at random times.
Mm.
So they're very supportive. I definitely have friends that I think who think I'm crazy. I'm pretty certain. Like, why would you want to talk about death? Like, that's weird. You're too young to be thinking about that, which I think is always an interesting phrase of you're too young, and it happens to all of us. So, okay, then at what age is it acceptable to think about death?
Yeah,
I don't know.
and my own biased opinion about that perspective is it's what a privileged perspective to have,
Yeah,
right?
that's fair. Yeah, totally.
And I have lots of people in my life who, like you're saying, maybe have never lost anybody before. And I think that for people who haven't experienced the significant loss or thrusted themselves into kind of the death and dying spaces, it's a lot easier to stay ignorant to it.
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
like, what is that doing for us to actually ignore something that's absolutely guaranteed and we don't know when?
Yeah. Totally. And I think for me, it was, I haven't had these experiences, but I know they're going to happen. I guess there's two options. They're going to happen or they're not. And if they don't, that means I died young. Like that's kind of like the only way that I don't lose people in my life is if I die young.
Mm,
That thought's always in my head. I say this to my friends all the time. I say it on the podcast a lot, and I think it freaks my friends out. The people on the podcast are usually like, I want to talk about death, so that's not that weird. But I could get hit by a car today
mhm.
or tomorrow. Like
Yeah.
that happens a lot. Car
Mhm.
accidents, people die in car accidents. I've had someone on my podcast who exact thing happened to his partner. So I know I know death is gonna happen. I don't necessarily know the car accident is gonna happen, but I know this is gonna happen. And so I want to deal with that at least in a way that I can to try to become more comfortable with it. But the flip side of that, I think, is what kind of got thrown in my face this kind of past month. I did think I was going to have to put Jackson down.
Hmm.
I had like the phone number dialed of, the home euthanasia people. And multiple times that night, I was like, oh, I think this is it. I think this is it. He's completely fine now. But it was that moment where I was like, I've been talking about death. I've been doing this project. I've been planning and prepping. This still really sucks.
Yeah.
This did not lessen this
Mm-mm.
pain or, I'm not gonna think my way out of grief or trauma or anything like that's also not possible. But what I have found, because I've had a couple people ask, like, oh, are you less afraid of death? And I'm like, yes, but I don't know by what amount. Like it's really like I don't know how to quantify it. Like I can't be like, oh yeah, and someone did ask, on a scale of 1 to 10. And I think it's a really hard thing from like, oh yeah, I used to be at a 9 and now I'm at a 7. Like, but what I have learned through it is you think about death and there's this kind of lens of mortality, your own mortality, and I guess also your loved one's mortality.
Mhm.
You live life differently. The really hard thing with all this stuff is it can get so cliche. Like it's still easy to fall back into old patterns and stuff. So it's not necessarily like every day I wake up and I'm like, oh, it's a brand new day and I get
Right.
to do this and this might be my last. Like
Yeah.
I still have my days where I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do anything. And I'm not necessarily gonna
Same.
live
Yeah.
this as if it's my last. Like I think that's almost impossible to live that way. And I also think that's not like necessarily a healthy outlook either of I'm going to live, this is my last every single day. Like, I think that just leads to a different kind of burnout. But it does shift just how you look at life, your decisions, where you're spending your time, the people you're spending time with. I mean, I've moved on. I don't really like the introvert extrovert terms anymore. So I'm a hermit. I like being at home. I like being with my dogs. I like reading. And so I have limited time that I'm going to want to spend with other people. And so am I going to really spend it with people that,
Mm.
doesn't necessarily serve, how I want to live my life and who make me feel bad about myself or whatever
Yeah.
it is. And so, yeah, I just feel like I
Mm.
live and look at things more intentionally than I did
Mhm.
before when I started. I
Yeah.
don't think that's where the question started, but I really rambled there.
No, it's
No, I know
no.
that's not where the question started. I definitely rambled.
Both can be true.
Yes. Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive.
No. Well, I'm curious with Jackson,
Yeah.
do you think when you're thinking about it very, like, honestly, is the energy around his death at some point more about what that means for him and what's next for him, or is it you having to live life without him?
Well, the question of what's for him next, I mean, I think that is also part of this journey for me is I've kind of and this comes very much I don't want to say that my dad like made me think this way. I think this again is a very western approach where science has become kind of what I would argue like almost a new religion. We put so much faith in it. And I'm not saying science is bad like but I kind of believe that nothing happens.
Mhm.
And so, like, when that's kind of your belief, obviously there's going to be, or maybe not obviously, but for me, that, that I'm not going to exist, that causes the panic and anxiety. And so, when
Mhm.
thinking about Jackson, I mean, I would love to imagine that there is something. I just haven't really found something that like resonates, or at least has it. The only thing that kind of resonates more is that there's some sort of like collective consciousness. And so, in that, I don't even know if that's really any different than nothing because I don't necessarily
Mhm.
know if I think in that the me, the self, whatever you want to call it, is probably gone. And so when I think about what's next for Jackson, I kind of do think it's game over, fade to black. And so I think a lot of it for me is not having him around. And I do
Yeah.
have a puppy. He'll be 19 later this year. And then Walter is 3. So completely different energy levels. And so I'm glad that I have, you know, a puppy to like at least like not make it so
Mm.
quiet.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm getting close to having had Jackson for half my life
Yeah.
and all of my adult life essentially. So we have been through moves across the country, some of like well, absolutely the worst times in my life. He's been there.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's the the anxiety, fear, whatever we want to call it is I would say mostly around him not being around because I mean, I want to believe that that I get to be reunited with him someday or something, but yeah, I don't know. It's really hard for me to believe that at this point, but I don't know.
Mhm.
It's only been like 2 years, 3 years with the project. Give me another we'll be back in like 3 years and maybe I'll be better by then. Maybe I'll be cured. Maybe we'll have some faith of some sort.
What is I'm like, what does cured even mean?
Yeah.
Believing in something?
Yeah. I mean, and
Mhm.
yeah, I don't necessarily I think that's the other thing that I've kind of realized. No one's gonna come on the podcast. No one's gonna leave a voicemail and I'm gonna be like,
That's
"Oh
it.
my gosh, this is it." Like people just kind of believe what they're
Mhm.
gonna believe unless they're willing to kind of open up to it.
Hmm.
And I just think I'm finding more and more like I'm trying to like open up, but I think ultimately what's going to come from it is not someone telling me like, oh, this thing that I haven't thought about or, have never heard. And it's like, oh my gosh, everything is, I see so clearly now.
Right.
It's going to be some form of acceptance around nothingness or, like I said, or this collective consciousness. I think someone on the podcast once called it like a consciousness soup, but I don't necessarily like I said, I think those in my mind almost might be the same thing in a way
Mm.
because I don't know if I really exist in either state.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no cure.
Well, I think maybe the reframe is because at least for me, looking for a quote cure makes me feel like that means, like, something's wrong with me or
Something's wrong.
broken right now
Totally.
versus, like, maybe this is just you and your beliefs, right?
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
what is it outside of us that tells us it's supposed to look something different, that you need a different way of looking at it?
Yeah, totally.
Which I'm curious with your comparison of, like, people are so staunch in their beliefs and, you're not gonna change people's minds, like, do you ever get a vibe that the people who come on your podcast really want to change your mind? Like, the reason for their call is they want people to believe what they believe?
I feel like I've had pretty good luck in the sense that there have been very few calls that I feel like come across, at least in my mind. I have a couple friends who do listen kind of religiously, and I'll definitely get chatter from them on different things. But I think by and large, what I've come across is it's just a bunch of people who are excited to have a platform to share their story. And in some cases, a story that they don't feel comfortable sharing with the people around them because they're worried about getting judged
Mm,
or and probably a myriad of things, but especially being judged for, what they think or how they feel.
mm,
And so by and large, I don't think I've had very many, but I definitely have had one where it was, I think you should go to church. I think it might help you. I say, thank you. Like, I appreciate your beliefs. I don't think that's really my journey.
mhm,
But yeah, by and large, although maybe I'm just, oblivious, but I do feel like most people aren't trying to convince other people of something else or me of something else. It's more
mhm,
just like probably the more accurate thing is it's I get to share a story and I might get to be on a podcast.
mhm.
Like I think there's maybe the excitement of that versus
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, like I think trying to convince people of something is if it is a motivation, it's further down the list. I don't know. I like kind of try to create space. I don't try to force a bunch of my opinions into the conversation. I don't try to get people to say anything they don't want to say or like I really try to let them talk and I just kind of guide the boat a little bit and just make sure we're not going fully off the rails, but we do go off the rails sometimes where it's like, oh yeah, we're not talking about death at all anymore.
Mm,
But that's part of the conversation, right? Is it's life and death are tied. They're so closely related. So
mhm.
in some ways when that happens, I'm like, this still counts.
Yeah.
This still plays into the conversation.
Is
But
there
yeah.
something that you hear, like, most consistently on your episodes? Is there, like, any theme that really pops out?
In terms of beliefs or
Any of it?
I think in terms of beliefs, the one thing that probably has been said more times on the podcast than anything else is energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
Mhm,
I feel like that's something that comes up all the time. And I'm like, yes, 1000% true.
mhm.
We know this. But what does that actually mean to you?
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, nothing happens. I mean, something does happen, right? Like at a very fundamental level, my body decomposes, it goes
Mhm,
back to the earth. I mean, and depending on how you do it, but it goes back into the earth or into the
yeah.
atmosphere, whatever
Mhm,
way that you do it. And that energy gets transformed into something else. Like, yes, all completely true. And so, yeah, energy can't be created nor destroyed. Nothing is still something. But when you say energy isn't created or destroyed, okay, how does that play into then consciousness? Is your consciousness energy? And what does that mean to you? Where does that go? So I think that's kind of then when I try to parse out very, very nuanced things and get into the things of the conversation that are so closely tied to what happens when we die of who am I? What is self? What is identity? What is consciousness? How does consciousness work?
yeah.
And so that stuff comes up from time to time too. So there are conversations that go that path that are more philosophical, like I mentioned earlier. And
Mhm,
then there are the conversations that are very, I've lost someone. And maybe the minority of all the calls is I'm also afraid of death and I'm trying to figure out how to conquer my fear too. There's been a
mhm,
couple of those, but yeah, the energy not being created nor destroyed is, I think, the one thing that is said
mhm,
more than anything else.
uh-huh. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. You ever interviewed somebody who is, like, about to die themselves?
So and it was almost exactly a year ago that I kinda
Mm,
switched to the anonymous format.
okay.
Before that, there's probably about 15 interviews. And one of the people that I got introduced to was a guy named Don, and he has ALS. And so we had a conversation. Well, it's interesting because that was probably about a year and a half ago, and he told me, I'm gonna die in the next year. He hasn't passed yet. I still go see him. He lives down in Newburgh, so I go drive down and see him, about every month or 2. But that was a really interesting conversation because, yeah, you get a different perspective on, "Hey, I'm going to die, and,
Mhm.
this is coming." And he's been very, very I would say he might be the biggest supporter of the podcast.
Yeah.
He's always challenging me to learn new things, explore different things, but then he's also like, "Oh yeah, you need to get someone." His I think biggest dream for me is to get someone who is going through cancer because he thinks that there's a really interesting story in there of if you're fighting cancer, like how do you balance that act of like fighting, but also kind of acknowledging that mortality is, an aspect there. I interviewed someone with Parkinson's, who's an anonymous call recently. I mean, I guess the other argument, I think the way that you phrased it right was, have I ever interviewed anybody who's dying? And from Don's Don's interview, and it might have been one of our conversations later, but he said that how interesting it is how people are so comfortable asking him the most strange questions.
Hmm.
And so he said he just had someone come up to him at one point and ask him, how does it feel to be dying? And we both kind of looked at each other and we were like, well, what the response is, I don't know. How is it to be dying? Because we're
Yeah,
all dying. Like
right,
we're all going through that process. We just have no idea when. And that's kind of how Don phrased it. It's like, I just have a better timeline than most people do. But that doesn't mean that something won't happen to me before him
right,
or that something else won't kill him before ALS does.
right.
But yeah, so that's probably been one of my favorite episodes. And he even, talks about how it was so wonderful to then be able to share with all the people in his life, just the episode and be like, hey, this is kind of what I think and what I feel and what I've been going through.
Mm,
But yeah, with the anonymous thing, initially I just got a phone number. So I really got on the phone and had no idea what we were going to talk about. Now I have them provide like a sentence or two. And
yeah.
that helps me also make sure that I don't just do the same type of call over and over and over again. Like I want to
Mhm.
try to get as many diverse perspectives as I can and different stories. But I mean, still, people will leave 2 sentences and then like we'll be on the phone call. The like descriptions like, "Oh, I'm an EMT and like deal with death a lot." And it's like, "Oh yeah, that's an interesting perspective." Get on
Mhm.
the call. Really the format is I ask a couple like intro questions or whatever, but really we just start with what do you think happens when we die? And then we see where the conversation goes. And I ask him the question and the first thing he says, "Well, I did die once." And I was like, "And that's not in your application?"
Way to bury the lead.
Right? And he even said, he's like, "I knew you'd like that." And so, like, I do have some idea going in, but by and large, there's stuff that comes up that they don't tell me going into it.
Mhm.
I've had 3, I think 3 people on who have had near-death experiences. One of them, she had had 4. And one thing that was really interesting to me about him and the one that had 4 is they both described it being really, really heavy, really intense, really dark, and really just oppressive. And what I thought was really interesting about it is the way that they both described it was exactly how I was feeling at that moment. Like in the real world. I don't know if that's the the right way to phrase it, but
Yeah.
in life I was feeling depressed, heavy,
Mhm.
intense. And it was the woman who had had multiple, she had another one and it was completely different. And
Hmm.
so that's one thing that I've been kind of pondering. I have some learnings of like Buddhism and stuff, but I think there is an aspect of like the quality of like where you are when you die. And that really, you're just like, that's interesting that like the states that they were in really were mimicked in this,
Hmm.
next space. But yeah, when this woman kind of was in like a much better place in her life and had it happen again, it was like, oh yeah, like I saw my mother coming to me and like all these like, and it was very beautiful and bright. And so it was just so much different. That was just something that kind of was like really, really interesting to me of how they kind of mirrored the state that they were in to what they experienced on the other side or whatever you want to call it.
That creates death anxiety in me. That actually, like, it's
I
interesting,
was like,
and
I
I'm
need to
like,
get my life in a good place fast.
right, and, like, how much obviously is outside of our control of
Yeah.
whatever, it's our time, and, like,
Yeah,
oh my
totally.
gosh, that's sounds horrible, actually, like, I
Whenever you think it's gonna happen, just smile and laugh
just
or something.
yeah, yeah, because we know fake smiles fix
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah, you can control these things.
Yeah, yeah, all the control in the world.
Because there's a point where I was trying to do a book club with the project, and I think it ended up just being my dad and I, which I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if this needs to be a full, like, production thing." And I tried to switch back and forth between, like, fiction and nonfiction,
Yeah.
and doing that for, like, a year. It was about someone who's, like, I don't know, going into some sort of medical profession where they had to do like not an autopsy, but it was like a bio class where they had to dissect a human.
Mhm.
And that book, I was like, oh man, you start thinking about all these like, oh, what happens next and this and that. And it's like, oh yeah, but I haven't really sat and thought about my body
Mhm.
and what happens to that. And it was just like after that book, I was like, I need a break for a minute
Yeah.
on like death related books. And so I'm just kind of like bouncing around from place to place and I don't know where I'm going, but I'm
Yeah.
somewhere or nowhere. I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's the question, isn't it?
That's one I'll think about tonight when I can't sleep.
Yeah. I mean, not to add more book recommendations, have you read any of Yalom's stuff?
No, because I know the name and I'm just like, I can't picture any of the titles. But yeah.
He's one of, like, the most well-known psychotherapists, so usually people have, like, ever taken an intro to psych class, they've heard of Yalom. What's really unique about him is he even being a therapist for decades and decades and decades and treating all types of people, he was always really open about his death anxiety.
Interesting.
He actually wrote a book with his wife a few years ago while she was in the dying process. That one's called A Matter of Death and Life.
Yeah.
You own it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on a list.
Actually, in 2008, he wrote a book called Staring at the Sun Overcoming the Terror of Death.
Have that one too.
Okay. And I have this written here. His belief in death was a lot about like energy stuff too. And he always had this analogy of like the ripples of death. The Yalom says that we can't stare at the sun for too long without being blinded, but we need to look at it occasionally to live authentically.
Wow, that's
At that point
awesome.
of it, it's like his idea, right, of like to work through his death anxiety, like needing to expose himself to it, but like what's too much.
Yeah.
Um,
Always the fun dance.
yeah, and the book with his wife was, like, just so beautifully written because the way they did it was they both took chapters,
Mm,
and so, like, the first
that's cool.
chapter would be his perspective and of her dying process of cancer, then she would write a chapter,
Whoa.
and
That's awesome.
very very much, like, their different perspectives, and it was interesting because there was a part of her dying process where she was like, "I'm, like, ready to go. This is too hard," and her anxiety about telling him that and his wanting to just hold on for dear life to
Yeah.
because he wasn't ready for that, and so it's just, like, a really, really
Yeah, it
beautiful
sounds
book,
powerful.
and for somebody who, again, his whole career very openly spoke about death anxiety, it was just such a amazing tribute both to his wife, but also to his own process.
I'll definitely
So,
have to read those. That sounds fantastic. And
yeah.
I even just love the idea of like, because I obviously, like I said, I own the book, but staring at the sun, I love hearing kind of like the idea behind that like
Mhm.
title or, whatever. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, it definitely sounds right up your alley. In some ways, you're like the modern Yalom, right? You're a death
Oh,
anxiety,
I
like
don't know. Whoa,
you.
whoa, 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 whoa. I'm just a Zach sitting in here trying to figure out anything.
But I mean, it's true in the sense of like he did so much of his work because that actually was fueled by his death anxiety. And that's very much
Yeah.
what you're saying the origin of like the voice
Oh,
mailbox
totally.
was in your podcast of like, can I learn enough to decrease the anxiety? And actually, I think I don't want to speak for Yalom, but I think for him, like, I don't know if it ever worked for him. Like he had the anxiety even in the book that he just wrote a few years ago with his wife.
Again, like for me, like I think it helps,
Yeah.
but I don't think it helps as much as you think it's going to help
Yeah.
in that capacity. Just because I think a lot
Mm.
of I think the big lesson in death is that it's letting go of control.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of scholarly, like educational pursuits, there is this aspect of like, I want to know more so I can understand it, so I can control it. That is a huge blanket statement. But I think there is this aspect of the more I learn about it, then the more I'm going to be able to, yeah, control. And I think death is the ultimate
Yeah.
not control.
That's how you
It's,
define research and science is to control and predict. Like that's
yeah,
the definition
yeah,
of it. So you're right.
yeah. And so, yeah, I think it helps. I think everybody should look at death to
Mhm.
some extent
Yeah.
because it is such a death phobic culture. And I think I've been writing more and more on my Substack about things that I'm seeing because of a fear of mortality,
Hmm.
an avoidance of mortality. I think, and I don't want to say that it would solve all the world's problems, but I think there are aspects of what we're seeing in the world is due to people not being able to comprehend not being here
Yeah.
and are trying to find a way to exist forever in some way,
Mhm.
even though that's not possible. It's not going to work that way. So yeah, I think you're 100% right in him probably not fully overcoming or even overcoming it, you know, at all, but I'm in a much better place in my life because I have looked
Yeah.
into it, but that doesn't mean that it's going to get rid of the death anxiety.
I think both through my own losses and then really diving into grief culture and really one of my most important goals is to help with our very grief illiterate society. Like I want to have the hard conversations. I want to normalize having these conversations. And I think for
Yeah.
me, the more I've been part of this and I got my end of life doula certificate last year. I'm not like actively practicing, but even going through that class,
Yeah.
I think I'm not afraid of not being here anymore. I'm not afraid of dying. You know, I say that with an asterisk because like if it's like a horrible, painful death, not knowing how I'm gonna die, like I just don't want it to be bad.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
But I think for me, it's what this can never take away is the ongoing just like grief and trauma that comes when I lose other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not knowing where they go or what happens on the other end, like, I don't carry that anxiety really much anymore, if at all,
Yeah.
but even if I, like, knew wholeheartedly exactly what happens when somebody dies, like, there's still so much pain left on the other side, and, like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
never gonna change.
Yeah, totally. The way that I can speak to it is having a bunch of callers who have talked about grief. There is one really, really powerful call with a guy who lost his son to suicide. And he was definitely very he kind of reminded me of my dad, but more positive. And kind of like the spin around death. Like it was they both kind of had this acceptance around it. And again, like I don't feel like my dad's like full on nihilist, but it's kind of just like, yep, it ends and like, whatever. And this guy was kind of like, it ends and it's beautiful because we get to be here at all and this and that. But one of the things that we really talked about was, very scientific minded, very pragmatic. Do you wish that there was something that you could believe in
Mhm.
that's next that would make the loss easier? And he was like, I've tried.
Yeah.
I have gone down that road. I have tried
Yeah.
to believe in this and that and whatever. And really, what I come back to is what I believe. And that is just that nothing happens. And
Yeah.
that, it's an honor that I got to have my son in my life, that we got the time together.
Mm.
And I appreciate, the life that I get to live. And I carry on his memory the ways that I can. And I think that's really powerful. But yeah, it's, again, from a person who hasn't lost a lot of people,
Mhm.
it's definitely hard to be here
Yeah.
after. Like I
Yeah.
kind of hear that over and over and over again. It's like, yeah, it sucks to have lost this person, which I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer statement. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to grieve. And then also it's hard to grieve in a place that doesn't know how to deal with it.
Right.
I certainly don't. I'm not a therapist, like I'm not professionally trained or anything. And I think I have gained skills and learned skills, but I mean, I think just it's been the easiest thing is to just be there, And I
Mhm.
think that's what I've learned is just like showing up, and I show up for these calls and I try to be authentic and I try to listen and really hear people and not judge. We don't talk about death, so then we don't talk about grief, and then we worry that we're going to offend people with what we say. And we also really love having like the ABCs of how to handle things. Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this is the rubric. And so yeah, then people don't know what to do because we don't talk about it. And so they just pull back because they don't want to offend, they don't want to say the wrong thing. Yeah, I think my point out of it is I don't know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
you know, but I've still found a way to comfort and be there for other people,
Mhm.
even not knowing what the hell I'm doing. And there's times where I say I'm sorry, and I feel like, "Ooh, I probably shouldn't have said that because I
Mhm.
know that didn't land well with that person." But I think they also understand that, like, I am just a person trying to be there for them, in a way.
Mhm.
And so I think it just takes a lot of willingness to show up and a lot of willingness on both sides to just kind of accept the other person where they're at.
Yeah, totally. I'm actually in the middle of creating like a how to support people ebook
Oh, awesome.
because
Yes, the ABCs.
because right, there's not really ABCs and there are I think tips that do help
Yeah,
people, right? Like
yeah,
'cause, I mean, everything you're saying is true, and again, it's a vicious cycle of at the core, we don't talk about these things, and so nobody knows what to do, and then people feel more alone, and then feel more awkward, and then part of these conversations and right, you and I come from really different backgrounds, and at the core, I
yeah.
think we both have the same goal, like, I'm partnering with my friend who's an estate attorney, and we're doing a will dinner in a few weeks to,
Nice.
like, talk about end of life planning and, I'll bring in some of my end of life doula stuff into it around, like, legacy projects and things because, yeah, it's, like, weird and the people that are coming are for this first one are just, like, my friends, and we all need wills,
I was
like
curious about the demographic of, like, who would come.
yeah, these ones I'm dragging my friends,
Nice.
one, again, we all need wills. I think that everyone should be thinking about their end of life
Yeah,
because even if you don't have possessions and things like that, like, do people in your life know what your wishes are, right? Want to be buried or cremated? Like, those are things
yeah,
people don't talk about. I was like, I love talking about it. I make people uncomfortable, but like, people need to be thinking about these things. Like you said, like,
totally.
age has nothing to do with it. You could be hit by a car tomorrow. Does your family know what you want that to look like? Or maybe you just don't
And
care, right?
and I think part of it, right, is what you're talking about in terms of, like, knowing what you want in terms of, am I gonna be buried? Am I gonna do the I always forget the right name for it, the human composting, cremation. A lot of that is to help out the family and your loved ones that are left behind.
It's
But
all to help out.
the other stuff totally, yeah. The stuff, though, that, like, also in a will that might be really, really important is, like, do you want a DNR? Like,
Mhm.
what about the stuff, like, if you got hit by a car and you
Yep.
don't die,
Yep.
but are in a serious position? If you haven't had that conversation with other people,
Yeah.
you need to. Like,
Yeah.
you need people to know, like, what you want.
Mhm.
Again, there that one, it definitely falls a little bit more of, like, it's help for you, but it's help for the people around you too to not have to make those hard decisions and
Mhm.
have regret or, all these horrible things that like come along with making those hard decisions.
Yeah, exactly right, and that, like, incapacitated what are my needs and wants, and actually part of the end of life doula class, like, we had to do our own, and there are questions I actually had never thought of before, even though I've thought about
Totally.
kind of the overarching, like, yeah, I wanna be cremated and this and that, but, like, it was asking, like, "Okay, if your life you could only live at what percentage capacity do you wanna, like, be saved?" Right? And
Yeah.
I'm like I always half joke with my friends, I don't know if my will to live is super big. Like,
Yeah.
whenever we watch, like, apocalyptic movies or shows, I'm like,
Oh
I
gosh.
wouldn't fight for my like, just end it. Like,
I should
why are people fighting
I
to
should
live?
not tell you what I've been telling friends. But in the same vein, like, I had a friend recently, she was kind of all stressed out because she had, like, a dinner with some friends, and they were big doomsday preppers.
Uh-huh.
She's redoing her house and like, "Oh, you should do all this stuff to the basement, you should build this out and this and that." And she's like, "Well, would you do anything? Would you like, are you buying anything?" I was like, "No." Like, if that happens, if some doomsday scenario happens, I need to find a way to, like, get rid of myself,
Yeah.
for lack of a better like, I mean, there's maybe other ways of saying it, because I'm not gonna thrive in that scenario. Like,
No.
I'm too trusting. Like, this is not gonna be like a kumbaya, like, everybody gets along, like, "Yeah, here, you have half of my bread, and I'll take, like, some of your water." Like, it's not gonna be like that. So, yeah, no, I'm out. Like, no, thank you. So, yeah, I am right there. I'm gonna start saying it the way that you said it. They're like, "Yeah, my will to live is not high."
I have to be like, I'm not saying I'm, like, actively suicidal,
No, yeah.
I just know that if I have to be in a chronic state or fight or flight, I don't
I'm
wanna do
fighting.
it.
I'm
Like,
fighting in the most extreme way.
I'm just, like, watching again, like, these apocalyptic movies, like, watching people fight every moment of their life and in fear, I'm like, nope.
Sounds
My
like a
friend's
lot
like,
of
"I think I'll
work.
do pretty well for a while." I'm like, "Good for you," like, but just
The
take
great thing
me,
is, you
like.
know how many people say that? Like, I think there are 2 categories of, like, the people like us who are like, "Yeah, not worth it," and then everybody else is like, "I'd do pretty well." And it's
Yeah.
like, the problem is all of you can't do well.
No. No, there's
Yeah.
a hierarchy for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
but again, like, even just thinking about that mindset with my incapacitated paperwork, I'm like, "Oh my god, what
Yeah.
percentage do I wanna still live with?" Like, I
Oh,
don't
totally.
it's if it's not pretty high, I'm like, "I don't know." Like.
I'm yeah, I'm super grateful. My dad, he sat down, it was like Zoom, right? But like, it was my dad, his lawyer, my sister, and I. And it was like, this is all that I want. When something happens, you call the lawyer, you do this, like, it was all planned out.
Yeah.
But one thing that came up during it was my dad had gone like really, really aggressive on, like, if anything happened, he was like, "Pull the plug," at, like, it was like 4 hours. And the lawyer was like, "Yeah, the earliest I usually see is like 48 hours." Like, 4 hours, they, like, don't even have time maybe to diagnose what's going on and, like, figure out, and he's like, and he might have even, like, been like, "Okay, 36 hours." Like, it didn't end up at, like, what the lawyer said he should do. Totally. And he's like, "Nope, I'm out. If anything happens, just get rid of me."
Well, people don't generally have these conversations, like, and
Nope.
we just need to be because
Yeah.
as you were saying, and I kind of interrupted, again, incapacitated, it's a different thing, but, like, when I'm gone, like, it's not about me anymore,
Yeah,
but
totally.
what happens is when people don't have these conversations, and I see it over and over again, whether people I know personally, people I work with as clients, like, the stress and anxiety and the family conflict that ensues when people have
Yeah.
not had the conversations is fucking horrible.
Even really close, tight-knit families, like,
Fall
that all
apart.
get along, there's so much happening,
Yeah.
so much emotion.
Like, the
Yeah.
best thing you can do for your loved ones is just, like, do your own work about it because, like, it's shitty to have nothing on the other end and have them try
Yeah,
to figure it out, and then, yeah, again, the amount of families I see that just, like, have fallen apart because of it is
totally.
devastating.
Like, that's not what that person would have wanted,
Yeah.
unless they were a
Most
jerk.
likely.
Yeah, totally. It's like,
Like,
yeah,
most
there's maybe
likely.
some that are like, "Yeah, I just wanna
Bring
tear
it
this
on.
whole family down."
Bring on the drama. Yeah.
Actually, now that we say that,
You're like, "I have some
I've got some
yeah,
plans.
I have some paperwork to update."
Yeah, I've got a will to tear up. I
It
wanna cause maximum chaos for my family.
and, not that this is where I intended for this episode to go, but in some ways, right, like, this is also on brand with, like, what your podcast is about as well. Like,
Yeah,
it's not just, like, what happens to me when I die or what do I think happens when people die. It's also,
yeah,
like, what happens to the living when I die and
yeah,
having conversations before you go.
yeah, and I think kinda like I said, I have worked as much as, maybe not as much, but, gone through some, like, death anxiety and fears and, like, worked on that, but it really is how it impacts how you live your life. And then, yeah, looking at how the decisions that you make will impact other people who are living in this life.
Yeah.
It's just it's hard to look past that when, you start I always kinda say just, like, looking through everything with, like, a death lens.
Mhm.
Just like when you have that up, yeah, this makes more sense. This is important. This is important.
Mhm.
It's probably more important to do your will than go to the gym.
Mhm. You could get in a car accident on the way to the gym.
Yeah, exactly. There's all these like longevity things that are getting shoved down our throats, but
Mhm.
yeah, we still aren't. And that's because we're afraid to die. And so it's like, I mean, what we all have, you know, I think everybody right now is supposed to walk 10,000 steps. You're supposed to, like, cold plunge and sauna 4 times a week. You're supposed to get, like, 2.5 hours of cardio and, like, an hour of lifting, and that's just, like, exercise. Then we get into diet. There's all these things that we're supposed to do to live forever, but then we still won't sit down and, like, look at our will and look at what we want to have happen to us
Yeah.
after because we are just continually telling ourselves that we're gonna live forever. That last thing that I just said is kind of the foundation of one of the things that I'm gonna start writing about the whole like longevity craze. Yeah, I don't think I mean, kind of like you said, it's really great with these candid conversations where there's not necessarily a plan, where you have no idea where the conversation is going to go. And so, we talked about so many aspects of, my project, but
Mhm.
then death in many capacities, life in many capacities. I wish I had like a profound, really like smart statement, but
You'll think of one tonight at 2 AM when you're not sleeping.
probably 2:30. No, 3, because I can't remember, I was supposed to remember something else at, like, 2 AM. I think that was before we started recording. I'll remember that at 2 AM, then I'll fall back asleep, and then I'll wake up an hour later. I'm not gonna remember anything is what basically is coming out of this.
You know what? Maybe that means you'll just sleep.
Oh, that'd be great. But, yeah, I don't know. If people wanna check out the project,
Mhm.
awesome. But ultimately, I think just finding more people like you that are trying to get people to talk and have these conversations. I think that's one of the things that I say a lot. And like I said, the podcast goes a lot of different ways, but I'm definitely coming from it from like a very philosophical aspect, but there's still very heavy conversations.
Mhm.
Every single episode, somebody who's, I don't know if someone will go listen to all of them, but somebody maybe who's listened to a bunch of them will be like, nope, there's this one. Every episode, we're laughing at some point. Even the
Mhm.
ones where it's like, I lost my partner in a car crash, or the guy that, like I mentioned, that lost his son.
Mhm.
We're still laughing,
Mhm.
and there is this beautiful connection that I think we've lost a lot of in the way that we operate in the world now with now I am gonna bitch about social media, but, like, communicating through social media and not actually sitting down and having real conversations,
Mhm.
um, and I think that is just I think and maybe that's my love language is deep conversations. This is maybe what I'm realizing right now.
Yeah.
But it's just I always leave feeling so good, even if, there's episodes where I'm crying and then I'm like,
Mhm.
shit, I'm gonna edit that and I'm gonna be crying again. But
Yeah.
it's just so nice to connect with other humans. And I think we need to do more of that. And this is a topic that I think is scary.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that it's not because I am still very scared about it,
Yeah.
but it is impactful on how it can help your life and
Yeah.
how you live it. Now I don't have to think of something at 3 a.m. That felt kind of profound.
Yeah. Beautiful.
It's like, oh, did I get that all down?
I'm like, "Oh, no, the audio just cut
it's
out."
like, it's like, hold on. Wait, what does that line say there? Oh, the end. The end. Yes, yes.
We I missed it. I didn't capture it, sorry. I put you on mute by mistake. No, that was really nicely said.
Yeah.
And, yeah, we'll do even a little shout out, she doesn't even know, but to Natasha for
Oh, yeah.
unknowingly connecting us, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I
More
think
good
it's
people in
wonderful.
this world doing cool
More
things and helping
Yeah,
other people.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you so much reaching
Yeah. You
out and
too.
letting us do this kind of impromptu recording
Absolutely.
today. I loved it.
I kind of like you said, I kind of went from 0 to 60 not talking about death at all, and now I talk about death a lot.
Mhm.
But again, this is another one of those conversations that I feel uplifted and, like, connected to another human in,
Yeah.
like, a really wonderful way. So, yeah, I appreciate you wanting to interview me. I think you even said, you're like, "You didn't mention wanting to be on." I was like, "I don't feel like I have anything interesting to
Mm,
say." And so I'm never, like, going to anybody be like, "I should be on your podcast." I'm like, if someone
mm,
asks, like, absolutely, I'd love to talk to you, but I'm the guy in the room that has no experience with really any of the real big things in this category of death. So I'm like, "What am I gonna say?" I just talk to I don't even really talk, I listen to people a
yeah.
lot. And so, yeah, I'm like, I don't have anything to say, but obviously we talked for a while. I have plenty of things to say.
Yeah, and I think it's a unique perspective too,
Yeah.
right? Like somebody
Yeah.
who again has thrusted himself into this world and like you're really just like gathering data right now
Yeah.
and you get to pull from it in a not as personal, maybe traumatized ways
Yeah.
some of us. And
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
I think it's super interesting. I think
Yeah.
it's cool what you're doing and the projects that you're doing and I'll make sure to put all the information in the show notes too, so people can
Awesome.
find you and your podcast and all of that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
It was
you.
wonderful.
Thank you for joining me for another episode. If this conversation helped you feel less alone, there are a few ways to stay connected into this community. To stay updated on everything we're doing, you can subscribe to our newsletter or follow us on Instagram. If you're feeling the digital fatigue and looking for support that you can actually hold in your hands, please join the waitlist for the Echo Registry. Our Pen Pal project is for anyone tired of connecting through screens and looking for the tactile connection of writing to another grieving human. And of course, you can grab the free ebook, Let Me Know If You Need Anything, and Other Things to Stop Saying, right on the website. And lastly, if you haven't yet, please take a second to rate and review the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's a small act that makes a massive difference in helping other grievers find this space. Take care of yourself, and I'll be back next week with a brand new episode.